It was a night that would forever change the sleepy campus of Riverside College, when the first signs of something terribly wrong began to surface in the most public and shocking way possible. Jessica Harlan, a 20-year-old sophomore with a bright future ahead of her in the pre-med program, was sitting quietly in the main library, studying for her organic chemistry exam, when, without any warning, she stood up, grabbed a heavy textbook from the table, and began screaming at the top of her lungs that she had to complete her assignment, or the doctor would be angry. Before anyone could react, she swung the book at her friend Mark, who was sitting across from her, striking him across the face and causing chaos to erupt as other students scrambled for safety. Security was called immediately, and Jessica was restrained, but not before she had repeated over and over in a monotone voice that the program had activated, and she was only following orders from Dr. Cole. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused, and when the campus nurse arrived, she had already gone limp, muttering about needing to reset before the next session. What started as a bizarre outburst quickly turned into a full-blown emergency when paramedics found a small electronic device attached to her wrist under her sleeve. A prototype-like gadget that seemed to pulse with a faint blue light before it was removed. The device was confiscated, and Jessica was rushed to the local hospital, where doctors noted unusual brain activity patterns that they could not explain with standard toxicology screens. Back on campus, the incident was initially chalked up to a mental health crisis or perhaps a bad reaction to party drugs, but a few observant students noticed that Jessica had been one of Dr. Adrian Cole's most dedicated research volunteers for the past semester, often staying late in the psychology labs for what he called his groundbreaking studies on subconscious influence and cognitive optimization. Dr. Adrian Cole had been the shining star of Riverside College's psychology department since his arrival from a prestigious East Coast university. At 42 years old, he possessed an undeniable charm that drew students to his classes in droves. His lectures were dynamic, filled with real-world examples and promises of unlocking the hidden powers of the human mind through cutting-edge techniques. He spoke passionately about how modern science could reshape behavior, enhance learning, and even cure deep-seated traumas with the right combination of technology and pharmacology. Many students, especially those struggling with anxiety or academic pressure, signed up for his extra credit opportunities, which involved participating in what he described as harmless experiments involving light hypnosis, subliminal audio, and mild nootropic supplements. Cole always emphasized the voluntary nature of the studies and the strict ethical guidelines he followed, and the college's institutional review board had approved his proposals without much scrutiny, impressed by his credentials and the potential for positive publicity. He lived in a modest house near campus, drove a nice but not flashy car, and was known to host small gatherings for his top students where they discussed advanced theories late into the night. To the outside world, he was the model academic, the kind of professor who made parents proud to send their children to Riverside. Yet behind closed doors, Dr. Cole was pursuing a far darker agenda that had begun 2 years earlier when he received an encrypted email from an old contact in the defense research community. The message offered substantial funding for a classified project aimed at developing non-invasive methods for behavioral modification and memory management, technologies that could be used in high-stakes interrogation scenarios or to create reliable human assets for intelligence operations. Cole, whose ambition had always outstripped his ethics, saw this as his chance to make history and secure his legacy, not to mention the financial rewards that could come from future contracts. He set up a hidden laboratory in the long-forgotten basement of the old science annex, a section of the building that had been sealed off after a renovation and was accessible only through a maintenance door that he had secretly modified with an electronic lock. There, using funds funneled through a shell company, he assembled equipment including custom EEG, headsets, audio induction systems, and a supply of experimental compounds derived from research into dissociative anesthetics and suggestibility enhancers. The goal was to create a protocol that could implant post-hypnotic suggestions, alter core memories, and establish a trigger-based control system that would make subjects completely obedient to specific commands without their conscious awareness or resistance. The recruitment was subtle and insidious. Cole would identify students who were isolated, financially strained, or dealing with personal issues through his role as advisor, and in casual conversations during office hours. He would offer them not just extra credit, but also small stipends for participating in his Advanced Cognition Enhancement program, framing it as a way to boost their grades and future career prospects. Once they agreed, the process began with seemingly innocent sessions in his main lab where they would listen to relaxing audio tracks while wearing monitoring equipment. Gradually, the sessions moved to the hidden basement where the real work happened. There, the students would be given injections of the experimental serum, placed under deep, hypnotic states using a combination of verbal induction and low-frequency sound waves, and then subjected to hours of repetitive messaging designed to rewrite their responses to authority figures and to create compartmentalized memories that could be accessed only with the right trigger phrase. Cole kept meticulous digital logs of each subject's progress, noting how some responded better than others, and adjusting dosages accordingly. He was particularly pleased with how the system allowed him to send subjects out into the world to perform simple tasks like retrieving documents or delivering messages without any recollection afterward, all while maintaining perfect, normal appearances in their daily lives. The cracks in the operation started to show when one of the subjects, a bright but troubled freshman named Tyler Brooks, began experiencing severe side effects. Tyler had been an ideal candidate, eager to improve his focus and get ahead in his engineering classes. But after several months in the program, he started having vivid nightmares, unexplained bruises on his arms, and periods where he would lose time, finding himself in locations across town with no memory of how he got there. He confided in his girlfriend that he felt like he was being watched or controlled, but she dismissed it as stress from his heavy course load. Tyler's breaking point came during a routine session when the serum dosage was increased to test higher levels of compliance. Instead of entering the trance state smoothly, he had a violent reaction, breaking free from the restraints and fleeing the lab in a panic. He managed to grab a handful of printed logs and a USB drive from Cole's desk before escaping through the maintenance tunnels. For days, Tyler hid in his dorm, terrified and confused, piecing together the fragments of what had happened to him from the documents he had stolen. The logs detailed not only his own sessions, but those of at least a dozen other students, including instructions for making them forget certain events and obey commands like Phase 1 complete, which would trigger a return to normal functioning until the next activation. It was Jessica Harlan's public breakdown that finally forced the issue into the open, as her incident happened just 2 days after Tyler had gone missing from his classes. Investigators later learned that Jessica had been activated for a task involving confronting a fellow student who had been asking too many questions about the program, but the trigger had malfunctioned due to an interaction with medication she was taking for an unrelated condition. The chaos in the library drew attention from local news outlets, and the story began to spread online with hashtags like Riverside Meltdown and speculations about cult activity or drug rings on campus. College administrators tried to contain the narrative by issuing statements about mental health resources and launching an internal review. But they were unaware of the full scope because Dr. Cole had covered his tracks well, erasing digital footprints and coaching his remaining subjects to deny any involvement. However, Emily Torres, who had been growing increasingly suspicious after her own sessions left her with gaps in memory and a persistent feeling of dread, had secretly recorded one of the basement sessions using a hidden phone app. When she heard about Jessica's incident, she knew it was time to act. She contacted her roommate, and together they reviewed the recording, which captured Dr. Cole's voice calmly describing the mind control protocol and referencing the military partners, who were eager for the next batch of data on long-term retention of implanted directives. The recording also included the sound of a subject being instructed to forget the entire session upon waking and to report any anomalies only to Cole himself. Armed with this evidence, Emily and her roommate decided they could not go to the college administration first, fearing that Cole's influence and the sensitive nature of the project might lead to a cover-up. Instead, they reached out to a local investigative journalist who had written critically about the college's handling of previous scandals. The journalist, intrigued by the potential story, agreed to meet them off campus the following evening to review the materials. What none of them realized was that Cole's monitoring system had flagged Emily's unusual behavior and the missing recording device from the lab. He had already begun the process of activating other subjects to locate and silence the threat, setting in motion a dangerous game of cat and mouse that would soon draw the attention of far more powerful forces than a small college campus could handle. The arrival of unmarked black vehicles on the outskirts of town later that night hinted that the hidden experiment was about to be exposed in ways that would shake the foundations of Riverside College and beyond. But for now, the first pieces of the puzzle were just beginning to fall into place as Emily prepared to hand over the evidence that could bring Dr. Adrian Cole's empire of control crashing down. As Emily and her roommate clutched the USB drive and printed logs tightly in their bags, they made their way across the darkened campus toward the off-campus coffee shop where the journalist had agreed to meet them under the pretense of a late-night interview about campus mental health resources. The air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat as they recalled the glassy-eyed determination in Jessica's face during her breakdown and the chilling monotone in the secret recording of Dr. Cole's voice commanding obedience without question or memory. They had chosen a public location, hoping the presence of other late-night patrons would provide some measure of safety. But as they walked past the quiet dormitories and the looming silhouette of the psychology building, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. A figure in a dark hoodie lingered too long near the side entrance of the old science annex, and another student who usually kept to himself now seemed to be mirroring their path from a distance, his movements unnaturally purposeful and his gaze fixed straight ahead even when crossing streets without looking for traffic. Little did they know that Dr. Cole had already activated two of his most compliant and deeply programmed subjects with a simple text message, trigger phrase, embedded in what appeared to be a routine department-wide email about upcoming seminar schedules, instructing them to retrieve any stolen materials at all costs and ensure the leak was contained by any means necessary, including physical intervention if the targets resisted. The first major escalation came when Emily's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number containing only the words, "Phase 1 complete," the exact trigger phrase that Tyler had described in his stolen logs as the command that would lock in compliance and erase doubts, causing her to freeze mid-step in sudden panic as a wave of disorientation and involuntary compliance washed over her from her own past sessions in the hidden lab. She fought it off desperately by focusing on the solid weight of the evidence in her bag and repeating to herself the faces of the other victims, like Jessica and Tyler. But the attempt to reassert control over her own mind was a terrifying reminder of how deeply the program had penetrated into her subconscious, and how close she had come to becoming another tool in Cole's arsenal. When they finally reached the dimly lit coffee shop with its flickering neon sign and the comforting smell of fresh brew, the journalist, a seasoned investigative reporter named Lena Vargas, who had built her reputation exposing institutional cover-ups at universities across the state, was already waiting in a back booth with her laptop open, a digital recorder ready, and a notepad filled with initial questions. Emily and her roommate slid into the cracked vinyl seat and, without any preamble or small talk, played the recording on Emily's phone, watching intently as Lena's professional expression shifted from curious skepticism to outright horror, and then to cold determination. As Cole's calm, authoritative voice detailed the mind control protocol, the use of experimental serums combined with hypnotic induction and audio triggers, and the references to military partners who were eager for the next batch of data on long-term retention of implanted directives and the reliability of post-hypnotic obedience in real-world scenarios. The printed logs confirmed that at least a dozen students had been systematically turned into unwitting operatives over the past 18 months, performing tasks that ranged from stealing confidential files from faculty computers and delivering mysterious packages to off-campus locations to testing the limits of control by being ordered to ignore personal safety or confront individuals who asked too many questions about the research. Lena immediately recognized the explosive, career-defining nature of the story and began firing off rapid questions about exact timelines, names of other potential victims, physical descriptions of the hidden lab, and any additional physical evidence, while at the same time drafting an encrypted email to her editor at the regional newspaper and another to a trusted contact in the state attorney's office who specialized in whistleblower cases involving government contractors. But their desperate race against time was about to intensify dramatically as the two activated students entered the coffee shop separately, one casually ordering a black coffee at the counter while his eyes scanned the room with unnerving mechanical focus, and the other positioning himself near the rear exit with his hands in his pockets and his posture rigid like a soldier on guard duty. Emily spotted them first from the corner of her eye and whispered an urgent warning to the others, prompting Lena to suggest they relocate immediately to her parked car in the back lot where they could continue the discussion in a more secure and mobile location, while she made the necessary calls to get the story and evidence into the right hands before Cole could react further. As they hurried out the side door into the cool night air, the hooded figure from the campus path suddenly lunged forward from the shadows, attempting to grab Emily's bag with surprising strength and speed. But the roommate reacted instinctively and shoved him hard into a metal table, sending chairs clattering and creating just enough chaos and distraction for the three women to break free and pile into Lena's sedan. The journalist's car peeled out of the lot with tires squealing just as another black SUV with heavily tinted windows and government-style plates pulled in from the opposite direction. Its occupants, clearly not local campus security or local police, but professionals moving with coordinated purpose. Inside that vehicle, a team of military scientists who had been dispatched from a nearby Black Ops research facility to assess and contain the breach of the classified mind control project were already coordinating with Dr. Cole via a secure satellite channel, ordering him to neutralize the immediate threat posed by the whistleblowers, secure or destroy all remaining data and subjects, and prepare for a full extraction of critical assets and key personnel before the situation spiraled further out of control and attracted unwanted attention from mainstream media or federal oversight committees. What none of the pursuers or the pursued had anticipated was that Tyler Brooks, still hiding in a cheap motel room on the edge of town and slowly piecing together his fragmented memories with the help of the stolen logs, had managed to contact Emily through a forgotten old email account with additional critical details about the basement layout, the exact location of the main server rack that held encrypted backups of every session, recording, subject profile, and progress report, and even a partial schematic of the electronic lock system on the hidden door. This new information transformed their desperate flight into a high-stakes calculated risk as the group made the difficult choice to head back toward the campus under cover of darkness to retrieve the server data before Cole could erase everything and disappear, setting the stage for a direct and dangerous confrontation that would determine whether The truth about the hidden mind control experiment at Riverside College would finally reach the public or be buried forever under layers of official denial, classified redactions, and the ruthless efficiency of black ops protocols designed to protect projects that were never meant to see the light of day. The night was far from over, and the stakes had risen from personal survival and justice for the victims to preventing a larger potential disaster that could affect not just the quiet campus but potentially national security interests and the lives of countless other unwitting test subjects if the technology and data fell into the wrong hands or was allowed to continue unchecked. With the weight of Tyler's new information burning in their minds and the military SUV now prowling the campus perimeter like a predator closing in on wounded prey, Emily, her roommate, and Lena made the high-stakes decision to push forward into the heart of the danger rather than flee, knowing that the only way to stop the program for good was to seize the irreplaceable server data before Cole could wipe it clean and vanish into the protection of his powerful backers. They parked Lena's sedan 2 blocks away in a residential side street and approached the old science annex on foot through the service alleys, using the partial schematic Tyler had described to avoid the main entrances where campus security had begun setting up temporary barriers in response to the growing number of reported disturbances across the grounds. The night air carried the distant sounds of chaos, another student screaming about voices ordering her to hurt someone before collapsing near the library, and the wail of approaching ambulances that the administration was desperately trying to frame as isolated mental health emergencies rather than symptoms of something far more orchestrated and sinister. Emily fought constant waves of disorientation as residual programming from her own sessions tried to assert itself, her mind flashing unwanted images of the basement lab and the calm voice telling her to forget and obey. But she gripped the USB drive like a talisman and kept moving, whispering to herself the names of every victim she could remember to anchor her will. Lena, ever the professional, recorded a running narration on her phone as they went, describing the layout, the tension, and the evidence they already possessed in case anything happened to them before the story could be published, her voice steady even as her hands trembled slightly from the adrenaline of the earlier attack at the coffee shop. The side maintenance door was exactly where Tyler had indicated, hidden behind overgrown shrubs and secured by an electronic keypad that matched the partial code sequence in the stolen logs. After 2 tense attempts and a near miss, when a campus patrol car cruised past with its spotlight sweeping the area, they gained entry and slipped into the musty stairwell that led down to the sealed basement level, the air growing colder and carrying the faint chemical tang of antiseptic mixed with something metallic and unsettling. Using the schematic to navigate the dark corridors lined with abandoned storage crates, they reached the false wall panel that concealed the true entrance to Cole's hidden laboratory, its surface disguised as ordinary cinder block but yielding to a specific pressure sequence that caused it to slide open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Inside, the lab was exactly as the recordings and logs had described, a nightmarish fusion of clinical research space and interrogation chamber, with padded chairs fitted with restraints, banks of humming EEG monitors and audio induction, equipment, shelves of labeled vials containing the experimental serum, and at the center, a reinforced server rack glowing with indicator lights that held the digital heart of the entire operation. Lena immediately began documenting everything with her phone camera, while Emily and her roommate worked to connect a portable drive and initiate the massive data transfer. The progress bar crawling agonizingly slow as gigabytes of session recordings, subject profiles, compliance metrics, and encrypted correspondence with the military partners flowed across. Every second felt like an eternity as distant alarms began to sound somewhere above them, likely triggered by motion sensors Cole had activated remotely the moment he realized the breach was heading toward his sanctum. The unexpected twist came when the transfer revealed a hidden subdirectory of files that had been heavily encrypted even beyond the main project logs, files that, when partially decrypted on Lena's laptop, showed not only the full scope of the domestic testing, but also internal military memos discussing the potential deployment of the mind control technology for crowd control scenarios, political asset management, and even the creation of deniable operatives who could be activated to carry out actions against perceived threats to national stability without any traceable connection back to official channels. The realization that the project was never purely about foreign intelligence or interrogation resistance, but had always carried ambitions for use on American soil, sent a fresh wave of horror through the group, hardening their resolve even as the server transfer hit 80%, and the sound of heavy boots and urgent voices echoed from the stairwell above. Cole himself appeared on a wall-mounted monitor, his face calm, but his eyes blazing with controlled fury as he remotely addressed them through the lab's intercom system, warning that continued resistance was futile and that the military team now entering the building had orders to secure the site by any means, including treating the intruders as hostile assets who had compromised a classified program. The final confrontation of the night began in earnest when two activated students, their expressions blank and their movements precise, burst through the false wall wielding improvised weapons from the storage area, forcing Emily and the others to scatter behind equipment racks while Lena continued the download from a crouched position. The roommate fought back desperately, using a fire extinguisher to create a blinding cloud of powder that allowed them to temporarily repel the attackers. But it was clear the tide was turning as more footsteps approached, and the military scientists, now on scene and taking command, began issuing orders to lock down the entire annex and prepare for a full containment operation that would erase every trace of what had happened here. With the transfer finally complete and multiple backup copies made to separate drives, the group made a desperate break for an emergency exit tunnel described in Tyler's schematic, knowing that the evidence they carried could still bring everything crashing down if they could just reach the outside world and get it into the right hands before the combined forces of Dr. Adrian Cole and the military scientists who had been called to the scene succeeded in silencing them forever. With the military scientists now on scene and the tunnel echoing with the sounds of heavy boots and shouted commands, Emily, her roommate, and Lena burst through the final emergency exit into the cool night air behind the old science annex, the portable drives containing the damning evidence clutched like lifelines as the full weight of the pursuit crashed down around them. Campus security lights were flashing everywhere, mixed with the strobing blue and red of arriving local police cars and the ominous black SUVs of the military team that had been called to contain the breach, their personnel already cordoning off the building and barking orders into radios about securing all exits and neutralizing any remaining assets. Cole's voice crackled one last time over a hidden in the tunnel behind them, issuing a final desperate activation command to the remaining subjects in a bid to stop the leak at all costs. But the programming was beginning to fracture under the pressure of exposure, as one of the pursuing students suddenly stopped mid-stride, clutching his head and screaming that he couldn't obey anymore, the first visible crack in the control system that gave the fleeing group a precious few seconds to gain distance. Lena, refusing to stop documenting even as they ran, uploaded a live encrypted stream of the lab footage and keylog excerpts directly to her editor, with instructions to go public immediately if she lost contact, the journalist's voice steady as she narrated their location and the presence of military personnel attempting to seize control of the scene. The final confrontation erupted in the open quad near the psychology building when Dr. Adrian Cole himself appeared, flanked by two remaining activated subjects and a pair of military scientists in tactical vests. His usually composed face now twisted with fury and fear as he demanded the return of the drives and warned that continuing to resist would only result in everyone present being classified as threats to national security. Emily stepped forward, despite the lingering fog in her mind, holding up one of the backup drives and shouting that it was already too late, that the truth about the hidden mind control experiments, the non-consensual testing on students, and the military's involvement was already spreading online, and that no amount of containment could undo what had been set in motion. The military team moved to intervene, claiming jurisdiction and ordering local police to stand down. But the sudden arrival of more campus witnesses drawn by the commotion, combined with Lena's live feed now being picked up by national outlets and the first viral posts showing Cole's own recorded voice detailing the program, created enough chaos and public pressure that the OV soldiers hesitated, their orders to erase the evidence clashing with the reality that the story had already escaped their control. In the ensuing standoff, Cole attempted one final act of desperation, activating a remote trigger on Emily herself in a last bid to turn her against her allies. But she resisted with everything she had left. The faces of Jessica, Tyler, and the other victims flashing through her mind as she broke the command's hold and hurled the drive toward a nearby police officer who had been listening, in growing horror. The resolution came swiftly after that as local authorities, backed by the growing crowd of students and faculty who had seen enough to refuse to let the military simply disappear the problem, moved in to take Cole into custody, on charges ranging from unethical human experimentation to assault and conspiracy. The military scientists forced to retreat to their vehicles and begin damage control calls to higher command, while the evidence drives were secured as part of an official investigation that would soon reveal the full, horrifying scope of the operation. Victims like Jessica and Tyler were identified and rushed into protective medical care as the first step toward reversing the effects of the serum and deprogramming. The college president issued a stunned statement suspending all psychology research pending review. And Dr. Adrian Cole was led away in handcuffs under the glare of news cameras that had arrived in force. His once unassailable reputation shattered forever. Yet, even as the immediate crisis ended and the first light of dawn began to break over Riverside College, a final unsettling detail lingered that opened the door to larger questions. For among the decrypted files was a reference to a Phase 2 deployment list containing names and profiles far beyond the campus, suggesting that the mind control technology and the Black Ops network behind it had never been limited to this single hidden lab, and that somewhere, someone else might already be preparing to pick up where Cole had left off.